Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Secretary, good to see you.
Good to see you. Thank you.
Long day?
Not over yet.
Not over yet. Fair. Prior to the June 30th veto, did the governor call you about the effect of the full veto on your budget and your agency and agriculture in general?
Call, no. Active exchange with the budget secretary in office, yes.
Okay. How about for the December 29th partial veto of the 2015-16 enacted budget?
Same.
Same. How did those conversations go?
You don't want to know.
Gotcha.
I would just tell you that, listen, I mean, this is important on ag and both as a department, as an industry. So the conversations were one of, extracting this point about it's not a value statement, right? It's about what was structurally, as the governor pointed out, a math issue, not one of whether it was support for agriculture or we found value in a particular line or not. So I would just say a very personal conversations and follow-up with him, talking about needs, talking about 16-17 budget needs. Much of what has been noted here today in our testimony, but also talking about what else was needed, what the issues were. I mean, this was a part of the conversation about what the implications would be. So just to say there's a very active conversation and engaged conversation about what was going to happen about the budget. One of the interesting things, and again, having the benefit of 20 years, it was a conversation with the governor about the budget and needs of Pennsylvania that had not occurred previously in my position as secretary or an executive deputy secretary with a previous governor. I value that. I really value that engagement and discussion with him about sort of what the needs are and implications, as well as sort of what future needs would be for budgets.
And we've known each other for a while.
Yes.
I know you know this budget inside and out.
Yes.
I know for a fact you knew every single line item. I'm not sure you probably knew generally how long maybe Penn State had to fund ag sciences, safety inspection, so forth. But at this point, at this juncture, Penn State notified us that they are looking at laying off individuals. At what point did you realize that was going to happen?
Well, I think, again, credit to the dean reaching out, late into the fall, winter, early winter months. So pretty active conversation with the dean about what that was going to look like, how it was tracking, what the implications would be. Driven initially by concerns about the Animal Health Commission funding and our partnership with the paddles, and again, knowing that was really a critical function where we share that between University of Pennsylvania, the department, and Penn State. And then as we've progressed, since that time in December, implications for the actual extension programming have been a pretty active conversation with him.
In your conversation with the budget secretary, the governor, on these line items, when it was brought up to him, the overall effect of food safety, animal safety, what was the response in those particular line items? Was it we still need to move forward? Should we take pause, not do this? What was the conversation back and forth?
Yeah, well, the conversation was first understanding the primary responsibility for public health and safety is held by the Department of Agriculture, not by Penn State University, number one. Two is they clearly have a supporting role there, and not to discount that, but when you look at the statute and the responsibility, what happens, as an example, in the Bureau of Food Safety is very different in our department from that perspective than what a Penn State University would do. Education would be important, outreach would be important. So in the conversation was understanding that the core functions of the department were protected, core public health and safety was protected. And we knew that in the decision of the land script fund, that if the basis of that decision is it's connected to land grant, then we understood that. Right, and we understood that there was going to be some time here to work out how to solve that, how to get the non-preferreds and the state-relateds funded.
So the governor's decision to veto the ag lining came back to Penn State's line item not passed by the General Assembly. Was that the threshold of his decision to veto the ag lines?
No, for the land script?
Yeah.
Yeah, connection between the land script fund and the land grant university, and not having the non-preferreds and the state-related funded.
So because we did not get, I mean, we attempted twice to get a 2/3 vote to pass those non-preferreds, because the General Assembly, in a bipartisan fashion, actually it was the House. The House literally did not have 2/3 vote, Republicans, Democrats, to pass that. The Senate did. Sent it to us. They're both Senate bills. So since we couldn't get 2/3 votes, bipartisan, for particularly Penn State, the governor decided to veto those line items, or at least the land script portion within the ag.
Yeah, again, the connection between the non-preferred and state-related and the connection to the land script was a straight line relationship.
Okay. So if we put those non-preferreds up again for a third time, where the administration assist us in doing a full court press for a 2/3 vote to get them to his desk so he can sign them, and then follow up with the ag lines.
Listen, I mean, I'm sharing with you sort of how that was set up. I mean, I don't know in terms of the advocacy and, how that would happen, but that connection is clear between the land grant and the land script.
Can you have that discussion with him?
Sure,
and
yeah.
report back on the conclusion of that? Because that'd be helpful. Because,
Okay.
if it's a matter of passing Penn State's, I voted twice for it. I'm there. More than happy to do that. Recently in an article you wrote, Lancaster newspaper, you said, many of our lines have been funded in recent years by another pool of money. We believe that should continue because families simply cannot afford to carry another $15 million in additional expenses. Now, within the governor's 16-17 budget, he's asking for a retroactive income tax of 11%. So those same families who can't afford $15 million in additional expenses can pay taxes on money they already were taxed on. Does that apply, that same thought apply to that retroactive income tax?
Yeah, so for context on my statement, that was specific to the lines that were to be funded from the Racehorse Development Fund, which include the Vet Lab, Fairs, and the Animal Health Commission. That was negotiated to be funded out of Racehorse Development Fund, became sort of general fund as part of the budget that went to the governor in December. That's the context for my statement, that that $15 million was coming out of the Racehorse Development Fund and shouldn't come from the general fund.
So your argument is that should come out of the Racehorse Development Fund, correct?
Yes,
and
as
not the general
negotiated.
funds?
Yes, correct.
Okay. But still, same applies. I mean, 15 millions and billions of taxes.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm not sure the response. Again, this question was specific to, and my statement was specific to what was agreed to after months of negotiations.
Okay.
To have that switched from Racehorse Development Fund, as agreed,
Okay.
to a general fund expenditure when the general fund was already short, wasn't the right way to fund those items. That's why they were lined out.
Okay. As my colleague Gary Day before me kind of highlighted, the health, safety, very important work your department does. Very important line items that fund our agriculture community. Recently, the Office of General Counsel wrote a nice brief to invoke the supremacy clause of the U.S. Constitution that allows the administration to ignore the state constitution. Then had the Attorney General write a nice get out of jail free letter so corrections gets funded. Will you be requesting the same line of action to ensure your vetoed line items do get funded moving forward?
I'm not familiar with that approach,
Yeah, any
Representative.
details of the brief you mentioned?
It was all over the press. It was a big corrections budget hearing.
We have a lot to deal with at the Department of Agriculture on a daily basis.
Corrections had a partial veto. The governor sent a payment request to corrections to get funded.
I read the media accounts. I did not read
OGC wrote this
I did not read the
great brief highlighting the supremacy clause and the issues related to health, safety, public welfare.
I get familiar with the media accounts, not the legal
All right.
brief.
So if you could, read through it
Sure.
Let me know if you will be processing the same to get those payments out to make sure Penn State doesn't close. And please let us know your conversation with the governor about helping us get the 2/3 vote needed to get Penn State's funding done, and then we can close out, obviously, that junction. If that's his issue, and it's problem solving. If that's the governor's crux of the issue for that being, let's just fix it. Let's link them together, get it passed, get it done, so we can move on and make sure these nice people, some of them are still here, get their funding. So I appreciate it.
Yep.
Thank you again for what you do. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.